Good evening. This is CTV News for Friday, October 21st. I'm Rochelle Metzger.
And I'm Byron Scott. Glad to have you with us tonight. Well, the new Regional Medical Center in Largo is one step closer to fruition. The state's Healthcare Commission approved the certificate of need yesterday, paving the way for the long-awaited facility. A host of elected and healthcare officials gathered at the boulevard at the Capitol Center. The location of the new hospital, when complete, the 200-bed facility will have 8 operating rooms and 45 emergency room bays. It will be the second largest trauma center in Maryland.
This is just the first phase of it. What this allows us to do is expand, as I said, the medical school here on the campus, but also just think around here where we stand is going to be new shops, apartments, senior housing. I mean, all of that's going to happen right here.
This is a big deal. This is a huge deal. This is as big or bigger than what you see on the National Harbor. Because of the transformational reality of transit-oriented development, we are building essentially generationally over the next 10 to 20 years. What is downtown Bethesda? What is downtown Rockville? You will be saying comparatively, oh, that's Largo Town Center. That's the new place.
Groundbreaking is expected by the spring, with the hospital opening in the year 2020.
A bond hearing is held today for the parents accused of murdering their infant son and burying his body in the woods in Riverdale Park. Judge Leo Green says the father, Antoine Petty, will remain in jail on a no-bond status. Meanwhile, bond for the 24-year-old mother, Janice Petty, remains at $120,000. State's Attorney Angela Alsobrooks reacts to the judge's decisions.
The judge had several things to consider. Part of what he considered was continuing danger to the community. He regarded the father, who had 7 failures to appear in previous court cases, as well as a history himself, as being more dangerous than the mother in this case. Ultimately, the judge's decision regarding bond is whether or not the individual poses a continuing threat to this community and whether that person will appear for court. A person who witnesses, assists, in any way in the harm or murder of a child is unfit to be around other children. So we agree with the judge's assessment that Janice in this case should not be allowed to be around other children. This death represents a tremendous loss to our community, and not only that, but in my mind represents yet again another instance where this community has failed to protect the child.
Authorities encourage residents in abusive relationships to seek help from the county's Family Justice Center.
Meantime, Alsobrooks has been outspoken on the issue of domestic violence locally and in Annapolis. During the last session of the General Assembly, lawmakers on both sides pushed for legislation to help protect victims. There were some obstacles along the way, but some victories as well. Tonight, as we continue our special series on domestic violence, Denise Douglas sits down with the state's attorney.
Angela Alsobrooks is the Prince George's County State's Attorney. She and her team have prosecuted domestic violence-related cases all too often.
What we see more likely than not is the traditional violence, which is a male perpetrator and a female victim. Now, we have seen cases where the men have been victims as well. We recently had a case where a woman ran over her husband in her truck as he ran away from her. But the majority of what we see would have men as perpetrators and the women as the victim.
Victims like Rhonda Santini, who we met earlier this year in Annapolis. She and several other Marylanders were lobbying for House Bill 1396. The proposed measure would have expanded the definition of domestic violence in the state to encompass harassing behaviors and destruction of property.
Abuse has to stop. And I'm just hoping with this bill, the next step would be the accountability of abusers, because that's really where the buck has to stop.
But HB 1396 didn't pass by the end of the 2016 General Assembly session. The bill's sponsor, Delegate Angela Angel, is devastated that it didn't draw enough support.
You know, I'm still advocating for it. I'm still talking with fellow legislators about it. One of the supporters in the original person that originally did the language for the bill in 2005 and who gave me the language last year didn't support the bill this time around. And I've asked multiple people, well, what happened? You know, and they said, well, we wanted to work on the language. Well, why didn't you offer any amendments?
As a domestic violence survivor, Angel knows firsthand how important such legislation is for victims.
And my marriage had at one point escalated into physical violence. After a while, my husband did leave and we were separated. And at a point, he began to constantly call, text. He was calling my job. He would threaten if I didn't listen to him, berate me. You know, he would send me text messages threatening to contact my workplace, threatening to contact people that I associate with, people that I work with, other fellow public officials. I went to court and, you know, explained to the judge what was going on. And he looked at all of the records I had. You know, I'm an attorney. I had plenty of records. I had plenty of evidence. And he said, this is really a shame. I feel very sorry that you were going through this. However, harassment is not one of the reasons that I can give you a protective order.
One bill in Annapolis that indirectly benefits domestic violence victims did pass this year.
We were successful earlier this year to increase the penalty for second-degree murder, for example. This was huge for us. It took us probably at least 3 years to go in to testify to change the penalty from 30 years to 40 years. This was a big deal for us because most of our second-degree murder cases are domestic, where juries may not find that it was premeditated, but instead would find that the violence caused the person to snap. For example, they may find that this wasn't premeditated, but it was second degree instead. If you're sentenced even to the maximum of 30 years and 15 years, you're eligible to be out walking the streets again. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to get more and more time for those kinds of offenses.
Our domestic violence series continues next week.
Pleas and protests, criticism and concerns, all heard during a marathon public hearing at Metro headquarters on Thursday. As we've reported, the transit agency is considering a permanent end to late-night service to allow more time for track maintenance. Such a move has some politicians worried about the effects on the local economy. Officials say it's been a struggle to find a compromise that pleases the jurisdictions Metro serves and its leaders. General Manager Paul Wiedefeld now says he may move to an earlier closure on weeknights and a later opening on weekends so that Friday and Saturday service will run until 1 a.m. Either way, riders say a limited schedule will hurt their job prospects and drain their pockets.
Pretty bad for people who have to work, get to work and from work. And I feel like that should be taken into consideration.
When you go into your cars and you're fine at night and everything like that, please consider the people who are not. Please consider the people who do not have enough money for those means of transportation. Please consider the people who do not have any way to get to a credit card, debit card, to get a Lyft or an Uber. Consider those people when you make your decisions.
It seems to me like this organization has decided, well, the only thing we can do is cut back time. Well, I heard that man say he only has a part-time job. If he only has a part-time job, he probably can't hardly afford Metro as it is. But if you take away what jobs he has, you're going to put him on welfare, and then we're going to have to pay more taxes.
View the various proposals and take an online survey at WMATA.com. You can also email comments or provide feedback in person to staff at various Metro Rail stations. The deadline for input is 5 p.m. on Tuesday, October 25th. Metro's board is expected to make a final decision in December. And you're watching CTV News. I'm Rochelle Metzger.
And I'm Byron Scott.